webinar. We'll wait just a few minutes before we get going for other people to come in. Randy, can you confirm? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. And like I say, folks, just a couple more minutes, couple more seconds, and we'll get going. If you're just joining us, you are here for the Green Rush and Cannabis Technology webinar. So Randy, why don't we kick it off? Let's get going. For those of you that I don't know, my name is Harry Brelsford. I'm the founder of the CannaTech group, as well as SMB Nation, community of managed services providers, MSPs in the tech space. And have known Randy since the Microsoft Retail Systems Day back in the small business server era. So Randy, before you know it, it'll be 20 years that we've known each other. Welcome aboard, Randy. Please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Harry. I'm glad to be here. I really enjoy and actively involved in this cannabis technology space. I've been in technology for 35 years, helping retailers improve their operations with technology. And now that the cannabis industry has popped up right here, and I'm out of Washington State, so my backyard here, gained a lot of a lot of insight and on what's going on in the industry and where the opportunities are.
There we go. Let's get started. So I put a fair amount of thought into this presentation for everybody, and here's why. Because you get a lot of questions about the cannabis industry. And in fact, just this morning, about 30 miles away in San Marcos, Texas, I delivered a breakfast speech at a community meetup called 1 Million Cups. If you want to make a note of that, they're in virtually every community. They meet once a month, typically in the morning with coffee. But it's a not-for-profit. It's a community of entrepreneurs. And so I presented on the CannaTech area, cannabis technology area. And you can imagine in Texas, where this photo is taken, there's more questions than answers from everybody. And so what I hear a lot just in North America is MSPs and VARs think they don't want to serve small storefronts. And so they think of the CannaTech opportunity is this old-fashioned gas station, or more, what they really think it is this, a real gas station that serves tobacco and stale hot dogs and that kind of thing. And the MSPs will come to me and say, I don't want to serve that. Okay. And I get it. So if we move on and look at what is the real opportunity with the cannabis supply chain, we'll do that next slide. But Randy, any thoughts? Because you're out there at dispensaries, you're working with multi-state operators, you're working with dispensary owners that have multiple dispensaries. Bounce off me. What do you think when people say?
Well, I was just I just got back from Las Vegas, Harry, and this is not what the pot shops look like in Las Vegas.
Yeah, exactly. Did you go to, what is it, Planet 13? Kind of the.
Well, I went to two different ones. I went to Cookies, and I went to Curaleaf. Curaleaf is the largest cannabis operator in the country, from what I can tell. And and I, did site visits and purchases at those stores and I did gathered some content as well. But yeah, it's not this experience here at all. It's actually very high end, very boutique-y, and professional organizations.
Yep, exactly. Well, let's move on. And by the way, folks, feel free to speak up if you have any questions. It's that kind of crowd today. So this is what the entire industry looks like. My friend Michael Rosenfeld over at CannaView published this last year, fall of 2021, actually almost 2 years ago. Last fall. I've got foggy head. So I called him up. And we got together and had a chat. And he's trying to do an end-to-end caniscape or landscape of the entire cannabis sector of the economy. And quite frankly, he's done a good job, and we're going to collaborate on a couple of projects. I'm right down here in the CannaTech area with a little bit of crossover to hardware, but that's where I live, and you'll see my chart in a moment. And so what this does, Randy, and Jerry, I see you're on the line, you're welcome to pitch in, but what this does is this logo chart combined with my logo chart more times than not makes people realize, whoa, this is a huge industry. And by analogy, going back to my photos of the gas stations, if all you thought the oil industry was gas stations, you're missing out on a huge sector of the economy, right? With construction and security and oil field services. So this is like looking at oil field services in the oil industry, and I'm sure they have a chart. Randy, thoughts?
Well, I was mentioning earlier, how these stores, are boutique-y, and I want to qualify that because what I've learned, through experience is that since this is an emerging market, Harry, that the the opportunity is larger, but there's a lot of dysfunction and a lot of unresolved channels. Okay.
Yep.
And that's part of this, I like the Caniscape, right? I mean, this is what you're navigating, and these are your customers, these are your partners. And that's a lot of relationships. And when you introduce, most of these are new companies, Harry, that's what makes it interesting. The other thing that I noted over and over again is one of the lessons to take away, and also kind of a qualifier even to, whether or not you want to get into the cannabis industry, is the culture component that we've talked about.
We have. There's
a lot of culture that goes into these companies, and they tend to do business around that culture. And you have to, in order to service this industry, I would take that challenge straight head on, right? Meaning you need a plan of how to address the culture.
Yeah. And I just used that example this morning, Randy. Late last week, you and I were on a phone call with a dear friend of ours who is seeking to extend her presence in the cannabis sector. She's already been in it about a good 6 months, and she's seeking to grow. And you're the one that you asked her if she had a tattoo. She said, yes, I do. I think she had a tattoo on her arm. And you're the one that said, from where you've worked in Fortune 1 companies, and she admitted, she'd cover that up. But in cannabis, what did you tell her? What did you tell her about that tattoo in cannabis?
You need to show that thing off. Yeah, no, that is that's I see a lot, and I, full disclosure, I don't have tattoos, but this is one of the challenges I had to overcome, right, Harry, and that I learned, and part of the wisdom here that we want to bring to the table, and it doesn't have to be you that solves the culture problem, but you need an individual in your company that that can carry on a conversation with these folks. And really come with some cannabis knowledge. And what you'll be interested to find out, I think, as you start looking around, and may even be yourself, but there's a lot of cannabis knowledge that does apply to how you help this industry, and just knowing knowing the product itself does help a lot, and then find ways to help them increase the sales of weed, and they'll be really happy with you.
There's another point of view, folks. This is the granddaddy of them all. This is the CES of the cannabis field. It's the big show. MJ BizCon pre-pandemic 2019. I'm standing up on a two-story booth and kind of shot the best photo I could for perspective. That particular year, I can tell you, I was really active, and it definitely felt like what they quoted, about 35,000 attendees. North of 1,500 booths, no doubt about it. It definitely had that feel. Randy, I think you were there with the firm you were with at the time, as I recall, in the booth.
Yeah, I had a booth that year. That's right.
Yep, I do remember.
Forget that year. I mean, it was just one thing after another.
Yeah.
One opportunity after another.
And folks, as you look into your journey into the cannabis sector, the economy, and again, we're coming at it from the tech side, but you got to go. You got to go to MJ BizCon at least once. It's like CES. Got to do it. And then here's MJ BizCon just a few months ago, and I unfortunately didn't have the full 3-4 days there. I only had a day and a half, but it was still a really capable show. And this photo is a little bit misleading because it's a fisheye versus the other one was straight on. So I'm gonna give them 1,200 plus booths, and they quoted over 30,000 attendees. I didn't feel that, Randy. You know how a lot of people are saying at shows like over in your world of NFR out in New York earlier this year, that the attendance was noticeably down, and reasonably so. And I kind of thought MJ BizCon was a little bit down, but it'll certainly come back strong next year. So again, just giving you perspective on the industry. Let's move on.
Harry, someone asked where that show's held, and that's held in Las Vegas.
Oh, okay, Randy. Thank you. Randy, can you monitor chat since I'm on screen live? Okay. Yeah, I believe, Randy, I think just up the other day, was it October or November? I know they're not doing December again. I know they didn't like that. So anyways, it's coming up in the fall. Okay, now here's something that's really interesting, that in the US, we have created nearly 500,000 jobs in the past 5 years. And there's a statistic that's true. There are more people in the cannabis sector than programmers, than computer programmers in the US. So just to put a book in on that conversation, since we're talking to a technology audience, but there's a lot of jobs and the growth has been tremendous. Now, that said, it's like any market, any emerging market will have corrections. It will have winners. It will have losers. You're going to see consolidation. They're starting to hit the law of large numbers. So it's going to be hard for them to maintain this growth, except for one thing, Randy, that we're bringing on a couple of big dogs. We're bringing on New Jersey and New York. So there's some external factors that could still have this be solid double-digit growth. Any thoughts, Randy?
No, it's not going to. I don't think it's going to slow down. Even in stores that have been here, for 7-8 years in Washington State. I mean, these stores are still increasing sales within the store.
Yeah.
And anytime you have increase of revenues, you got increases of everything. And so no, I don't see it slowing down. I see it even accelerating a little bit more as you say some of these bigger states come on. And also what's interesting, as you know, and this is probably part of our presentation here, is the new technology that's coming into the field, that has resisted in the past.
Yep. Hold that thought.
Yeah, I figured I should.
Yeah, hold that thought. We'll get to the right charts on that. So folks, here's the research I do for Marijuana Venture Magazine. Oh, let me reach down and grab them. So here's Marijuana Venture Magazine. Sidebar on that guy who's in the cover photo, the surfer out of California. He's actually a solutions architect with Salesforce.com and is implementing that as a solution in the CannaTech supply chain. But what's interesting about this chart is I've worked on it for 18 months. I've had a couple iterations. The first time I published, it had 60, 70 logos. Now it's over 150 logos. The other thing that's interesting is some of the mergers and acquisition activities, some of the consolidation activities. So there's some stories behind the stories. So for example, something you can relate to in this audience would be Akerna up here and we call them an integrator. I really probably need another bucket called platform, because Akerna is acting a lot like ConnectWise. It's acting a lot like Datto. Okay, so they've gone and snapped up a handful of technologies and they're integrating them into a platform. So when you see Akerna, just think ConnectWise. And that's where this industry is going. And Randy, it's going at a much faster pace than we saw in the SMB MSP community with these kind of consolidations and roll-ups to a platform. Randy, anything stand out on here that's interesting to you?
Well, I mean, as you can tell, this is an impressive chart. And again, once you know some of these backstories on really, what they've accomplished or not accomplished, and who they're related to, there's even more opportunity. And here's where I'm going with that, is because most of these solutions are new. And yeah. And so not people aren't really happy with a lot of these solutions. And so that dust, will settle, right?
Yeah.
But these are coming and going quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I already have a correction to make. DataAl over here under loyalty messaging and wallet solutions was acquired by Philo over here, and that logo went away. So it's now rolled into that brand that I'm circling on the essentially the lower right, circling DataAl over on the right. The other thing I would tell you is I just traded notes today and I've had dialogue with Seiko. So I'm circling the Seiko logo, and best known for watches. It's a Japanese company, best known for watches, but they are also a player in mobile printers. And the story they like to tell, Randy, is if you ever get a traffic ticket out on those highways in the state of Texas and they print it out on a little mobile device, it's a Seiko device. So that's one of their.
We have a question. Where do we currently see the best fit between MSP and Canescape? And one of the things I'd like to say, I want to turn it over to you, Harry, but is what the industry is missing is the essentials right now. That I think that's where I would focus. And that's where, poor decisions are being made or not being made, period. And, to where they're not deploying the right components, and it's happening at an elementary level. And so, they need the expertise to come in and say, no, here's how you, put in infrastructure networks, and here's how you monitor, here's how you do Wi-Fi. That's those essential technologies, I think, are a great entry point if that's, your strength. So I would go in with my strength.
Yeah. And again, at the breakfast speech this morning at 1 Million Cups, I had that question. It was they formatted it differently because it wasn't from an MSP. But basically, the entities, let's go back up to see if I can go back. So the entities in the industry, so this is who you're going to serve, okay, as an MSP. And it could very well be some tech companies. And the reason it could be a tech company is you might be a channel partner for these tech companies and help them sell and implement and maintain and support their solutions. So that's MSP 101. But at the end of the day, short of a few logos on here like a Tilray or Aurora, Randy, these are SMBs. This is how I described it. It's still in the small, medium business sector of the economy. I count SMB up to 500 employees, 500 seats. So that's going to cover the vast majority of these entities. So number one, just take a deep breath. You're an MSP and you're serving an SMB. That's it. That's it. And do what you do best. Now, number two, there are workloads I'm going to show you in a couple of slides that do make this niche, this particular vertical, different. And so you're going to have to slowly get into that and take care of your customer. But again, great question. Randy, any other question?
The hot, no, not yet, but the one hot thing that is coming up just, right now, right, is security.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, security is that situation is changing, and the needs there will therefore change, and will need to be addressed.
We move on. So here I just published, I'm happy to announce today that this just hit the stands in the April issue of Marijuana Venture magazine. And Randy, here's what happened is I did this chart for a couple iterations, and there's always going to be additions and subtractions and that kind of thing. Fair enough. Then my crowd, the SMB Nation crowd, the VAR crowd, which is a lot of where you clearly spend your time, Randy, the solution architect, the gentleman I mentioned, and system integrators and dealers and IT consultants, they started raising their hand. They started raising their hand and said, well, where's my chart? Well, here's the thing about that chart, you guys, is it gives you bragging rights. So for example, Luis Alvarez out of Central California supports the wine industry from grape to glass. Well, it was a very natural act for him 10 years ago to get into cannabis. Very similar workflow. Blake out of Colorado Springs, Colorado's an MSP. And so they actually use this chart for bragging rights. And, Randy, I'd love to see the people who are on this webinar as they explore and can document that they're in the space. It'd be great to get them on the chart, next year. Any thoughts on the different service providers? I see you're here somewhere, right? Or a company you've been affiliated. No, there you are. Retail Technology Coaching, Randy.
Yep. Great. And there's a few entities in here that I'm associated with, and it's and I've brought a lot of technology to the industry. And that's how I'm helping the industry, and that's kind of the mentality that you almost have to have, because you have to have a little passion behind this one, because there's bumps in the road. The emerging market is frustrating.
Yeah.
We have another question. Someone's working on a startup MSP and really want to focus on this space, the CannaTech space. What are some places that should start building the offering, and how do you see cloud services like Azure, AWS for solutions in the Canna space?
Well, I'll tell you what, hold that thought on resources. Okay, so Randy, don't let me forget. I'm gonna share a couple resources that I think are good, and I'll share just off the top of my head. But in the cloud computing, that's actually a really good question. So I'll give it a stab, and then Randy, you can kind of come at it. So on the one hand, it's an SMB. And so are you going to use cloud for email and 365 and that kind of thing? Absolutely. It's just an SMB, and you want to do it securely. On the other hand, one of the unique qualities is the video preservation. So you have to have, what is it in Washington State, 60, 90 days of archival video?
45 right now.
45 in Washington State, varies by the state. Mm-hmm. And you have multiple cameras. If you've gone in these sophisticated dispensaries, like for example, one in Anchorage, Alaska, which allows vertical integration. So they're growing it in the warehouse, they're processing it, and they're selling it. They have a camera, a line of sight to every activity. And Randy, that's a lot of gazillibytes of storage up in Alaska with our good friend Dan Foote.
Well, and this happens even with little stores, Harry. I helped quite a few of these build outs, and by the time you get done running all the wires for point of sale, for payments, for and the cameras, you're up over 50 wires, and that takes some equipment. And and there's about 100 mistakes you can make between starting on your first wire and finishing with your 50th. There's 100 things that can go wrong. And these stores are trying to do it on their own, right? They're trying to hire their friends. They're trying all these things. They're making all these mistakes that, most of us know not to make. And so I think that's the opportunity, is get there at the right time and provide, information, services.
Yep. Well, we're looking at a chart now, and Randy and I actually did a webinar on this a good 6 months ago. It was in August, Randy. You'll recall I was on the road in late August, but we still pulled it off. And I need to update this. So this chart's coming up on a year old. My good friends at Purple Fog Enterprises helped me put it together. So did Randy. But we need to update it because, Randy, there's a huge component missing, and it's security. Look at it. I don't show the diagram, or I could make a bubble, right? We could put this entire chart inside a circle that says security.
Yep. Yeah. Security is becoming an issue here because of the product and the cash, and also the economic times. I don't know what's going on, but it's serious.
Yep. Yep. So, folks,
and this is this is one of my favorite charts, Harry. I think
yeah, I know it is.
Yeah, because and I can't wait to revise it a little bit, but this is how these businesses have to run. Now, what I mean by that is that they don't have a choice, Harry. They, in order to compete, selling cannabis in a jurisdiction which would be equivalent to a state or a country, you have to have all of these components to your business, or working efficiently in order to compete and grow and thrive. And online menus. I mean, what retailer in the past has specialty retail, let's say, or even hospitality or quick service, has there been 100% deployment of online ordering in every single operation? Right? None. Right? With cannabis, 100% of these have online ordering here, and that creates all kinds of interesting things. It creates demands on accurate inventory, right? Because how do I know what to show online? And so now you have to be an inventory control, efficient operation. And so they learn a lot of this the hard way, and they don't need to. They don't need to. With the service provider, these things can be plugged in and tuned up, without difficulty, because you wind up learning all the components, right?
Yep. Yeah, Randy, I just wrote another one down, and I'll get with you. In fact, let's do this, Randy. It'd be fun to do this before April 20th. Update this and get it in a future issue of the magazine. Folks, April 20th is the 4th of July. It's called 420, 4th of July for this this particular segment. That's
it's the number one day of the year for sales, for sure. Yeah. By far, and we're talking almost double, probably. I mean, it's just off the charts.
Well, and tell a story about how you and Dan Foote at MSP in Alaska were impacted. Was it last year or 2 years ago? But the system went down. Was it Metric or MJ? But
no, it was their point of sale that they're using up there. That runs on an iPad and has these other limitations just kind of baked right in. And the infrastructure for that point of sale system is, has a cloud component. When you're ringing that many transactions all around the country, you're going to be affected in Alaska and everywhere.
Yeah, they went down.
If it doesn't just slow down, and what I mean by slow down, we're talking 30 seconds for the receipt and drawer to open. How about 2 minutes for it to open? If that kind of thing happens in the middle of your Christmas, rush here, you're not happy.
Yeah, and in this case, my understanding was it was a few hours on the busiest, absolute busiest.
If it crashes, it takes a long time to bring them back up. Yeah.
And the reason I share this, folks, is this is the kind of work you can anticipate doing is an MSP in the cannabis space. It's actually, it's fascinating. And Randy will update this chart, and we'll come back with another webinar to go through that. Okay, so here's the unique CannaTech workloads. And folks, feel free to ask questions. So looks like, I think I saw a thought bubble go up. Do we have a question?
Yes. How much of the regulatory statutes do you have to be knowledgeable about being involved in this industry? And I do understand it may vary state by state, say, Canada, California, dispensary. I mean, absolutely. The more you know, the better off you're going to be. And that's, you do have to be organized by jurisdiction. And I would learn it all, because again, that's going to be what gets you the contracts. It's not that much, and the more you know, the more they like you, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'll add to that is some of these businesses expect you to know them.
Yeah, and that's a tall order. So I'm pretty conversant in the state of Washington, Randy, where I paid. I'm in CannaTech 6 years now, 5 of them in the state of Washington, and I still kind of default a lot of my examples to the state of Washington.
Yeah.
So folks, what I did is I got involved and on the mailing list of the State of Washington Liquor and Cannabis Control Board. And you get these emails with regulatory updates, most of which don't apply. It's going to be about packaging and labeling, not really where an MSP lives, but some do apply. Randy, they got rid of, was it Metric? And now they have their own API to report the traceability and compliance data of the state of Washington.
It wasn't Metric that they replaced. They replaced Leaf Data Systems, which was an Akerna company.
Okay.
We mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
MJ Freeway, there's some history behind that group, and they won that contract. BioTrack had it to start with, so the integrators, all integrated to BioTrack, and again, it's one of the first states to do this stuff, right? So everybody's integrating. Well, then they decide they don't, like BioTrack, and and basically wind up putting in, going through another bid system, and wound up with, the next selection that you get, when you go through government bid processes. And Metric lost that bid. Actually, they, without getting too deep into that, but then so they weren't happy, right? Nobody was happy still. And so now the state of Washington has decided to do their own custom system. And they call it the, simple cannabis reporting system or something like that. And and we're back to CSV files, Harry. It's really kind of embarrassing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's embarrassing, but it's also the opportunity, Randy, for the MPs on the call today, because guys, that's how young it is. I mean,
right.
Think about when you were doing SneakerNet with a floppy disk. I don't have a floppy disk, but SneakerNet to go between two PCs back in the 90s, right? I mean, that's kind of where we're at. And then
all these integrations should happen through these APIs, right, Harry? I mean, there's these systems are all built to integrate with, and they do integrate, and sooner or later, Washington State, will be integrated, I would imagine, and release their APIs. And so that's, that's part of the landscape. It's constant change.
Yep. It's interesting you mentioned no one was happy. Last week, Randy, as you know, I went to South by Southwest here in Austin, Monday, Tuesday, where the cannabis technology track or a cannabis track, forgive me, it wasn't strictly technology, but on the technology lectures I went to, and I'm talking with some of the attendees, and we've heard it time and time again, Randy. I've had this talk with you in Seattle that no one's happy right now with the technology, and I attribute it to the maturity continuum. That this is so new. It's not that we don't have security and ERP, seed to sale, supply chain software. It's not that at all. It's more about happiness. And Randy, you're out there every day, and I may be exaggerating. Nobody's happy, but a lot of people are not happy.
Yeah, and part of the conundrum is they don't know why. They've got some dissatisfaction, but it's really hard to tell what component of the technology is causing the dysfunction, right, or causing the dissatisfaction. For example, when we were using Leaf Data Systems, that was the source of most of everybody's problems, right? But it's hard to see that, Harry, when you're in the retail store and you're really just using someone's point of sale system, right? You don't know that point of sale system is actually struggling because of the traceability behind it. So those are the things that need to be understood, and then you can provide, better solutions, and which is what, you and I are always proud to do.
Yep. Well, that's kind of what I do as a principal analyst, staying on top of the cannabis technology area. So I don't know if I can still raise Jerry. Jerry, I see you out there. I don't know if you want to talk analytics for a minute. The final point. I put security first because, Randy, I believe that's where the conversation should start for an MSP. Is let's have the security conversation. Jerry, there you are.
Hey, Harry, how's it going?
Good. And you're going to be a speaker at our conference. I'm going to get to that in one slide.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I think right now, and because we operate Standard Insights, the company I helped co-found operates in a variety of verticals. But, right now, if companies want to build their moat, doesn't matter if it's in cannabis, beer and wine, and elsewhere, they're going to have to get data driven. And not only data driven, but most of the data that's out there today is business intelligence. Now incorporating AI into it can help businesses help see into the future, if you will. So I think as more and more, at least the maybe the good ones become cognizant of that, they'll rise above the rest.
Yep. Yep. And hey, Jerry, really appreciate your enthusiasm for our event that's coming up. Let me hop over to that. Before I do, folks, any questions about the unique cannabis technology workloads? And while you're thinking, if you have a question, put them in chat. But security, this is really interesting. Security is both physical and cyber. And I had a guy reach out from London. Fella Moreau is a managed security service provider who puts on events. And he said, can you name one industry? I'm trying to put together a presentation. Can you name one industry that has both physical and cyber security? And I said, well, I most certainly can, Randy. That'd be CannaTech. All right, we'll move on. So why should you attend our show? And I'm going to get you some details on the next slide. Forgive me, I probably put it out of order. We're doing a 3-day in the third week of June. It's a co-located show inside a much bigger show called the IT Expo. That's a 30-year-old show that's always really innovative. And so they have a blockchain panel, 5G panel. They have a co-located for CannaTech. So what we're saying is it's a lot like Small Business Server. And some of you know me from those days. This is SBS 2003. We held our first SMB Nation in 2003 when that product was being released. We held it about 2 weeks before it was being released in Indianapolis. And Randy, we pulled 150, 200 people. They came for a 3-day and they got their head around Small Business Server, right? And this was the release that really was the gold standard. That's what we're talking about, right? This is the original SMB Nation for you to come and accelerate your entry into the segment. To one of our listeners' points earlier about, what are some resources? You can advance your domain knowledge of CannaTech. Randy, to your point, you have to at some point have domain expertise down the road, but you have to have domain knowledge about the space, Randy, because to your point, they're going to out you. Right. If you don't know what you're talking about, you're going to get outed.
Yeah. And it is a community, and the communities, these stores talk constantly, and they share dirty laundry all the time. You have to be really careful. We have a question, Harry, that I like because it's fits into my spot here. Are there only certain point of sale systems allowed in the industry? Are there particular protocols that need to be followed within a store or dispensary? This is my area of expertise.
It is.
Worked in the retail space, including on the inside, which I learned some really interesting things. But answer is yes. The point of sale systems, the list is growing a lot, but each by jurisdiction, you're probably going to have a authorized list of point of sale systems. And these are like, they call them integrators. So they're, authorized or certified, to where they have proven to the state that they can properly upload sales transactions, to the traceability system. So you go through a step there. And so the point of sale companies have to do that by state. And, not every point of sale company does every state. So, but it does get quite specific. Are there particular protocols that need to be followed? There's like a short list, really, a handful of compliance protocols. And any point of sale system in the space is going to need to address that. The quick examples there are age verification, right? We deal with that in other industries, but it is intense in cannabis. The second example is purchase limits. The point of sale system, there's compliance where these stores can get in trouble. Harry, they can get tickets, etc., fines, if they sell over limit, over a certain, limit to a customer. And then there's some other limitations or restrictions, compliance restrictions, again, by jurisdiction. It gets really kind of a hassle, I'm going to say, with the medical workflows.
Yeah.
Versus, your regular retail recreational workflows. So the medical workflow, there's a whole nother layer of these topics, right? Of these protocols. I like that word. workflows, right there.
Yeah.
In order to get a patient, into a store, I mean, I'm talking to someone in Louisiana, and they actually call them pharmacies down there. Right? It's quite the variation, and there's definitely protocols, and it gets intense with medical.
Well, and that's our mutual friend Victor out at Lake Charles, and that's gets us back to this slide, because Victor was our first attendee to sign up for the event I'm going to show you in a minute down in Fort Lauderdale. And Randy, he was over the top enthusiastic about being able to go to a targeted, smaller event, because MJ BizCon's ridiculous. I mean, go to MJ BizCon, but it's like going to the Super Bowl.
You need an agenda before you go, right? Because otherwise you're going to be going in circles.
Yeah, it's just go. Let's get MJ BizCon off the table. But what he was excited about is this is how we created the SMB Nation community and communities back in the day. Was we had that first show, and the third point I wanted to make, and this is what Victor's excited about, is what I call Hallway 101. Right, Hallway 101. You're making these relationships with people in your field and immersing yourself with like-minded geeks, and those relationships go on today, Randy. I mean, that's how you and I have had a long relationship. I see Jeff Adsma's on. Jeff,
what really I've always gotten lots out of these trade shows, and really it's the collaboration here. It's being able to talk to other people that are willing to talk to you and share information.
Yep.
That's going to help you build your business plan.
Randy, any more questions before I go to the next slide?
Not yet. Okay.
So folks, here's the deal, and I'm going to send you a follow-up email. I'm going to also send you a discount code. I'm going to send you a 50% off discount code to be an attendee at this show. So we're talking the third week. It's really, if you want to make a mental note, the core days are the 22nd through the 24th. The 21st is kind of that proverbial register and walk around day. But we're doing a 3-day inside of a much bigger show, IT Expo. It's typically 7,500 attendees in the IT Expo Super Show. We're gunning for a couple hundred, which is great. I like the show with a couple hundred people because you can actually ask questions. You can actually get to know each other. 3 of the speakers are on today, myself, Randy, and Jerry. So give us a fair shot.
Harry, I mentioned one of the things that I like the best about these shows is sharing information, but actually, there's really something more important than that, and that's building relationships.
Yeah. Well, that's how I built my company.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's how business is built.
Yeah. That made my career, was to go to shows, probably too many shows, Randy. Now I don't even pick up t-shirts when I go by a vendor booth. I have too many. And Randy, they were sure trying to give them away at South by Southwest, let me tell you. And I'm like, no. Any questions about what we're doing? And then I'm going to talk about some resources for the one individual who wanted to know some resources. And when I send out my my thank you email, I will include a column I did. So I do the monthly column at Marijuana Venture. And I did a column with exactly that: podcast, magazines, events, and trade associations that you should get involved in. So I'll attach that to the email. Jenny over in the radio control room will keep me honest. First call for question. All right. Well, I think, Randy, we checked off. We ran a little bit over. I budgeted 30 minutes, but we ran a little bit over. That's not a surprise when you start talking cannabis. Folks, look for an email from me. Oh, I think one popped in, Randy.
I'm not quite following the comment, but Michael's saying that thinks that would be awesome. I'm not sure what that's related to.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Michael.
Yeah. And I look forward to seeing everybody there. And oh yeah, for the follow-up email, Harry. I look forward to seeing everybody there and building these relationships. There's some good things that are going to be happening.
Well, it's a little bit like this. You reminded me of an old saying in IT. and it comes from the telecom sector, right? And, I haven't spent a great deal of time in telecom. I did a little, but Microsoft Response Point in particular. But in the telecom sector, there was this joke about the late 90s, like being the real go-go era of where they were laying fiber across the country. They had all this funding. And then came the nuclear winter in telecom, right? So a little bit like .com, .gone. And I remember seeing all those workers out there on I-90 just laying cable like to Chicago. I mean, it was ridiculous. And they really built the infrastructure. Then the market corrected. And the old saying, Randy, is, oh, Lord, just give me one more telecom boom, and I promise I won't piss it away this time. And that's really how I'm viewing the CannaTech opportunity. So you haven't missed it, right? And there's states coming online. So just take a deep breath. You haven't missed it, but you need to activate now. And this should be, in my calculations, it better be about a decade-long run. I mean, markets do mature and technology changes. But, Randy, this is the best one I've run across. Once you get past the hysteria of cybersecurity in general, this is second place. This is second place for an opportunity here and now. So, in any event, let me talk about resources. Okay, so I'm going to email you the article, but I'll just rattle off a couple of things that I'd like you to consider. So there's, if you're in the New York City area in the third week of May, there's a show, you just go. It's focused on investors and dispensaries called MJ Impact. And this will get you into a show that's a little bit broader audience versus my show is targeted for the people on this call. MJ Impact. And then you have in July, you have the NCIA, National Cannabis Industry Association, has their Cannabis Business Summit in San Francisco. I think that's around July 20th. And then I'm probably forgetting one or two, Randy, and I'll get everybody the list. Then you have MJ BizCon in the fall. And again, I'd offer that's a must do. You need to give that serious consideration. It's relatively cheap, sub $500 show. And quite frankly, Randy, I think you can get by with just the Expo Hall pass. It's so ridiculous. You might as well just spend your time walking the Expo Hall for like $2.99. And then in terms of
Harry, these, as far as these shows go, the ones that you're referring to are the bigger national shows. I'd like to mention that I would also look out for the local shows, right?
Yeah.
They'll be a little bit smaller, but then again, that's where those relationships are being built. And you can get a booth at a pretty low cost in some of those little shows, and gosh, you may wind up with a dozen customers, just like in one day.
And then another resource is the magazine, of course, that I write for, Marijuana Ventures. So if you reply to my email with your address, I will get you a free subscription. Jerry writes for him as well. And then you also need to get MJ Biz Daily, MJ Biz Daily. That's the people that put on MJ BizCon. So you got to get their magazine. I'm sorry, I don't have one in arm's reach. But that's kind of where you start. And in terms of podcast, Ganjapreneur is a good one.
Mm-hmm.
There's not surprisingly, there's a bunch of them out there. Any final questions? Oh, and one other thing, I'd be remiss as an author. If you go to my site, so if you go to thecannatechgroup.com, this is a book I did a couple years ago on how to be a cannabis MSP. And it's a funny story because you don't see the word cannabis in the title, because culturally, when I was writing the book, there was still sensitivity to the word cannabis. So I called it Vertical Edition, Volume 1 Vertical Edition, and the vertical's cannabis. And then you turn the cover and it has all the conversation about workloads and the cannabis space and so on. So Randy, this is truly a case of you cannot judge a book by its cover.
Well,
folks,
that's an interesting topic, because a lot of businesses have had to make all kinds of decisions like that in order to get into the cannabis space.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And it's a commitment. Randy, it's along the lines of MSPs on this call are going to know, another hot area. I'm not suggesting cannabis is the only hot area, but there's a Department of Defense compliance area called CMMC, right? And a lot of MSPs who have a compliance background with HIPAA and other, they just have that mindset. They're all gravitating towards helping defense contractors and other people in the defense sector comply with CMMC. It's I'm going to say it's coming out. It's kind of like some of the NIST standards. So it has to do with security hardening and this and that and the other. And it's a real commitment to develop that domain expertise. And I'm suggesting, treat us the same way, right? Treat the CannaTech space the same way, like you would breaking into HIPAA, breaking into CMMC. Randy, what I'm trying to say is there's a commitment of resources to do this, right? You kind of got to be all in, and
you need a person that's all in, that focuses only on cannabis and that can master that. That's one person there, right? Sometimes that's difficult.
Yeah.
But really you need two, right? I mean, to do a thorough job, and then find a way into the community in your area.
All right. Well, folks, we have gone over time, and I appreciate you sticking with us today. So thank you very much. And I will be getting a thank you email out to you tomorrow. Let me just make a little note what I promised. While I'm doing that, I could take one final question. So we want the discount code and we want resources. Got it. Randy, thank you for helping me out yet again on a webinar. Let's do it again.
Yep. Look forward to it, Harry. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Have a great day, everybody.